How's it going? My name's Mac and welcome back to another Dead by Daylight related video today. I wanted to go ahead and talk about my overall opinions regarding the night ever since its release into the live game for Dead by Daylight. Because although my initial video I basically gave a lot of strong positive opinions about the night, there was a lot of issues I just kind of wanted to address related to the killer since its release into the live game. For starters, I think it's pretty well known in the community that since the night has released into the game, he has probably become one of the most buggiest chapters in Dead by Daylight up to date, and that's pretty impressive considering other killers have come out pretty buggy, like the twins, who even to this day still has like game-breaking bugs every once in a while, such as the baby for Victor not freezing up and the transitioning between Charlotte and Victor not working properly, and we occasionally get some bugs like Wesker when he came out, where his ability kind of just made him go through walls or to a certain extent still miss out on hitting survivors because the zoning for that hitbox was either too big or a little bit too small. So the developers had to make some tweaks and do a bunch of bug fixes to fix his ability. But the Knight's been pretty unique in terms of how many bugs he's brought to the game. It's not only that only his killer power is bugged and necessarily broken, but somehow this chapter managed to make other killers worse, breaking other killers' abilities and their powers, and causing all different kinds of game-breaking bugs as well, which is very interesting to me how that necessarily happens. I mean, on the screen here you can also just see where I get fat-shamed because for some reason map generation has been completely screwed over, but they're trying to, I believe, add more detail to maps by utilizing more things getting generated in the map. However, they're not necessarily setting correct boundaries for where these things spawn to prevent fat shaming areas next to tiles and loops and everything. So overall, everything about this chapter has been very buggy, and it's been kind of screwing over the people in the community and frustrating a lot of the players because it's not necessarily something people have been asking for, like the map generation. However, again, developers make changes that we didn't ask for, and now things kind of get broken. I felt like Dead by Daylight and behavior was on a good trajectory for listening to us as an audience, as a community. However, obviously sometimes behavior makes decisions that they really shouldn't have not made, and I don't know why they don't play test these things more or make sure these things are more ironed out, considering that between the PTB and the live game, these things have like over a month and a half of time in the player test build, where they still somehow manage to just screw everything up and not fix things before launch. So as of today, as of this recording was made, with the gameplay here, he was supposed to have a lot more bug fixes and updates that would fix a lot of the issues regarding his power. But personally, I still think there's a lot of issues with the killer that I think need to be talked about and addressed. I mean, in terms of bugs, I believe this is a bug. I don't know why this keeps happening, but you can see at the bottom of the screen it flickers all the time. His prompt to use his ability to summon guards. You could have the guard basically fully recharged and ready to spawn, but depending on where you are in the map, that thing flashes and does not let you summon guards at random moments, which makes it really difficult when you're trying to give a guard an order such as break a pallet, break a gen, or just spawn when you're trying to be effective at loops. And that's ultimately why I want to talk about how, since my initial video, I'm just overall disappointed in the Knight. A lot of people have been comparing him to killers such as the Artist, and that's just because he is the Artist but worse. And although conceptually his killer is so cool, probably one of my favorites in the game, it's really frustrating to try to use him and borderline unfun because his power gets reduced to basically like an Artist. If I wanted to play the Artist, I would play the Artist. I don't want to play a killer such as Knight, who's a much more less fun Artist because his abilities don't work or function the way that they need to. The Artist, for example, can spawn her crows at any point at a pallet, and that not only forces survivors to leave that pallet, but it's very quick, it's very easy, and if the survivor chooses to run around that pallet and messes up, you could literally manually operate that crow to send it and hit that survivor for dealing a health state. What makes the Knight's killer power really frustrating is that in most instances, when you spawn that guard will never catch up to the survivor. It's very easy to deactivate guards and or just survive the hunt that happens whenever the guard spawns and starts chasing a survivor, because they are ultimately just like a killer where they're slow and they have to follow that direct path that a survivor runs in, so they'll never be able to cut the survivor off and be able to damage them and hit them. In most instances, outside maybe one every couple matches, you won't really get hit with one of these guards, which makes that power already extremely useless compared to the Artist, when she can very easily on multiple different survivors, if you use her properly, hit survivors, dealing them health stage, or force survivors out of a loop or something right into you to allow you to deal that health state. So overall, like, the Knight's power is very much like a worst artist, and you have less control over how the guards are impacting loops. And when it comes to patrolling things, I feel like the patrols make for really weak map pressure. Survivors can see the wisp that spawns in the match when you're trying to use a guard, which makes it really difficult to try to spawn one in because they know where it's coming from. And then the survivor knows exactly which direction to run from the wisp in order to basically avoid the hunt in 99% of cases. And even then, again, if the guard does recognize and spot the survivor, it takes way too many seconds to spawn in. And again, because the guard has to walk in the trajectory of that survivor, it's going to basically never catch up to that survivor before the timer of the hunt runs out, making that basically very, very useless. There's also flags that spawn around where if you're the survivor being chased, you can easily just walk into one of those. Or you can just save a survivor if a guard tries to spawn on you when you're trying to get, unhook somebody. If you unhook that person, that basically prevents that guard from killing you because that guard would just disappear out the air. So saving survivor cancels it. So overall, I think the Knight's just pretty weak as a killer, and he gets reduced to be a mouse 1 killer, which is pretty frustrating because of the way that this update has a lot of fat shaming things that's morally impacting killers. And because he's a weaker artist and he's very less effective and it's harder to control his guards as compared to like an artist as Crows, his power is very difficult to use. It has a pretty high skill gap if you want to kind of figure it out and make it something that's very worthwhile. But more ultimately, I don't think the Knight at his best is any better than like an artist at their best. And I think that for most people who try to use the Knights, because the killer power is so buggy and the guards can be so useless, even the patrolling not being very helpful, you basically waste a lot of time if you try to use his power, which means you basically want to be basically become a mouse 1 killer, just hitting survivors with your basic attack the entire time. That basically makes him probably the most unfun killer to play because a lot of his power is very unfun to play with, and even from a survivor's perspective can be pretty unfun to play against, which is really sad, considering that he is, again, authentically and conceptually a super cool character. And I felt like he had a lot of potential that could have been tapped on, but the developers chose to, over the course of the PTB, just nerf, I think actually buff, I think they nerfed and buffed a few numbers, basically with how the guards operate and reaction time and different kinds of things, versus actually reworking the ability to make the guards a bit more interesting, which is a waste of time and honestly a waste of developing potential, considering that they have some really cool character models for even the guards themselves, so we just don't get to see them. And not being able to control which guard you want to use at what given point. The clown could control what gas that they want to use for the tonics, but we cannot control what guard you basically want to use at any point. We have to use whatever is basically in order each and every different time, and those guards have different pros and cons, and a lot of the times those pros and cons aren't even that substantial anyways. So I feel like if you're going to play the Knight, the best way to play the Knight is probably just to reduce yourself to a mouse 1 killer. And then outside of that, if you could, in very rare instances, order your guards to bring palace or gens to save you that time, if you are able to quickly spawn one to order it to do something, just do that. And then other than that, if you have a 3-gen stack, it might be helpful to, if you could try to quickly navigate a wisp to place a guard down to try to apply some gen pressure while you're trying to finish out whatever survivors are left. But ultimately, yet again, there's no point in playing the Knight, and I feel like the Knight is very weak compared to a lot of different killers, to the point where he's not only just weak, but he's also not very fun to play, which is, I understand, very ironic and contradicting to my last video title, because when I first played him, he was a lot of fun. But then as survivors obviously adapt to how the killer basically plays, everything becomes a lot worse. With how the meta is, with how the game operates, and how people are able to adapt and play the game, and how all the spawn changes with procedurally generated tiles stuff and all of the objects in the environment have played out, the killer for the Knight is basically a useless mouse 1 killer. And sadly, I don't really find him to be very enjoyable to play. And for a lot of survivors, people complain a lot that he's not very fun to play against, which is another topic with how behavior needs to discover new ways to develop new powers for killers. Because there is a point being made here where a lot of killers coming out are basically anti-loop, and we don't necessarily get these super creative abilities anymore that make killers more interesting and unique. So overall, I believe that the Knight really needs a hard rework. Will behavior ever get to it? Probably not, because they're always turning the content wheel and trying to put out the next chapter for people to buy. So hopefully in the future we'll see some major changes with his ability, and if not, unfortunately he's just another chapter to be left in the dust and a lot of wasted potential. But anyway guys, that's gonna be it for me. I hope you guys of course enjoyed the video. As always, if you made it through this entire video, please leave a like, subscribe. I really appreciate you for tuning in. I've been gone for a month, and this video probably is not going to perform well in the algorithm because I've been gone for so long. And people probably lost faith, and they're probably not counting my channel. They're probably not watching me anymore, which is okay. But I hope people, whoever did maybe watch this, if anybody did, enjoyed it for what it was. That's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Mac. I'll talk to you guys all there. Peace out.